Before we begin this incredible story, please hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon so you never miss our emotional stories that touch hearts every single day. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable moment. The morning sun blazed over the outdoor shooting range in Southern California, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Sarah Mitchell stood nervously behind the firing line, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the rental pistol. She was 23 years old, fresh out of college, and had come to the range with her boyfriend Jake and his buddies for what they called a fun Saturday activity. But Sarah didn't feel like she was having fun. She felt completely out of place. Jake had been shooting since he was a kid, growing up in rural Texas where guns were as common as fishing rods. His friends were all experienced shooters too, laughing and joking as they loaded magazines and compared their groupings on the paper targets downrange. Sarah had never held a gun before today. The weight of it felt strange in her hands, foreign and intimidating. The smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air, and every shot from the neighboring lanes made her flinch. She lined up her sights on the target 25 feet away, a simple paper silhouette with rings marking different point values. Her first shot went wide, missing the target completely and kicking up dirt from the backstop. Jake glanced over and chuckled. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She tried again, this time hitting the very edge of the paper. Her third shot missed entirely. Behind her, she could hear Jake's friends whispering and snickering. One of them made a joke about women and guns that made her stomach twist with humiliation. Sarah blinked back tears of frustration. She wanted to prove herself, to show them she wasn't helpless, but every shot seemed to make things worse. The pistol felt like it was fighting her, the recoil jerking her hands upward each time she pulled the trigger. She couldn't seem to find the right stance or grip, and nobody was offering to help. Jake was too busy showing off his own skills to his friends, putting rapid-fire rounds into the bullseye of his target, the range officer. A weathered man in his 60s walked past and gave Sarah a sympathetic look but said nothing. She fired off the rest of her magazine, each shot landing somewhere random on or around the target. When the slide locked back on the empty gun, she set it down on the bench with shaking hands and stepped back, feeling defeated. This was supposed to be fun, but all she felt was inadequate and alone. Standing there while the men around her treated, shooting like it was the easiest thing in the world, Sarah was about to tell Jake she wanted to leave when a tall figure appeared in her peripheral vision. She turned to see a man walking toward her lane. He was probably in his mid-30s, with short dark hair and a quiet, confident way of moving. He wore a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, nothing flashy. But there was something about his presence that commanded respect. His arms were muscular and marked with a few scars. His eyes were sharp and observant. The man stopped a respectful distance away and gave Sarah a small nod. His voice was calm and steady when he spoke. "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but notice you're having some trouble. Mind if I offer a few pointers?" Sarah hesitated, glancing over at Jake, who was still absorbed in his own shooting. She looked back at the stranger and nodded slowly. "I would really appreciate that. I've never done this before." The man stepped closer, his movements careful and non-threatening. "My name is Marcus," he said, extending his hand. Sarah shook it, noticing the firm but gentle grip. "I'm Sarah," she replied. Marcus smiled slightly. "Nice to meet you, Sarah. Now let's see if we can turn this around for you." He looked at her stance and the way she was holding the pistol. "First thing, you're tensing up too much. Shooting isn't about fighting the gun. It's about working with it." Marcus demonstrated the proper stance. Feet shouldered width apart, knees slightly bent, body leaning forward just a touch. Sarah mimicked his position, and immediately she felt more stable. "Good," Marcus said. "Now your grip. You're holding it like you're afraid it's going to jump out of your hands. Hold it firm but not tight. Think of it like a firm handshake." He showed her how to position her hands where her thumbs should go, how to create a solid platform for the weapon. Sarah picked up the pistol again, this time with the corrections Marcus had shown her. It already felt different, more natural. Marcus loaded a fresh magazine for her and stepped back. "All right, now let's talk about sight alignment. You see those 3 dots on top of the gun?" The man explained everything patiently, never talking down to her, never making her feel stupid for not knowing. He treated her like someone who simply needed guidance, not someone who was hopeless. She She took aim at the target, applying everything Marcus had taught her in just those few minutes. She squeezed the trigger slowly, and the shot rang out. This time the bullet struck the target dead center in the 8-ring. Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Marcus nodded with approval. There you go. You've got this. Just keep doing exactly what you just did. Shot after shot, Sarah's confidence grew. Her grouping tightened, her hands steadied, and the fear melted away. Jake finally looked over and seemed surprised to see Sarah actually hitting the target consistently. Jake walked over with a smirk on his face, his friends trailing behind him. "Well, look who finally figured it out," he said, his tone carrying a hint of condescension. Marcus turned to face Jake, his expression neutral, but his eyes measuring. Jake barely glanced at him before turning back to Sarah. "Babe, we're going to head over to the rifle range. You coming? Or are you going to stay here with your new friend?" Sarah felt a flash of irritation at Jake's tone, but before she could respond, one of Jake's friends spoke up. A stocky guy named Derek, who always seemed to have something to prove. "Hey man, you giving lessons now?" Derek looked Marcus up and down. "You some kind of instructor or something?" Marcus remained calm. "Something like that. I've been around firearms for a while." Derek laughed. "Yeah. Well, I've been shooting since I was 8 years old. Competed in 3 gun competitions." He puffed his chest out slightly. "What's your background?" Marcus didn't rise to the bait. He simply said, "Military." The word hung in the air for a moment. Derek's smirk faded just a bit. "Yeah, what branch?" Marcus paused before answering. "Navy," Jake jumped in, trying to sound knowledgeable. "Oh, cool. So like what? You worked on ships and stuff?" Marcus's expression didn't change. "Not exactly. I was a SEAL." The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jake and his friends went quiet. Even Derek, who had been so cocky a moment ago, seemed to shrink a little. Sarah's eyes widened. She didn't know much about the military, but even she knew that Navy SEALs were elite special operations forces. Derek recovered first, though his bravado was clearly forced now. "Well, that's impressive and all, but SEALs use rifles mostly, right? This is pistol shooting. Totally different skill set." Marcus just nodded slowly. "You're right. Pistols and rifles are different." He glanced over at the rifle range area, where several shooting benches were set up with longer distance targets. "You guys heading over there?" Jake saw an opportunity and grabbed it. "Yeah, actually. You should come watch. Derek here is one of the best rifle shots in our club. He can put rounds through the same hole at 100 yards. Derek tried to look modest, but failed. "I do all right." Marcus considered this for a moment. "That's good shooting. Mind if I watch?" The group agreed, though Sarah could sense a weird tension forming. She followed along, curious to see where this was going. They walked to the rifle range where targets were set up at various distances. Derek pulled out his R-15, a rifle he'd customized with expensive upgrades and accessories. He proceeded to shoot a very respectable group at the 100-yard target. The bullets clustered within a few inches of each other. He turned around with a satisfied grin. "Your turn, Navy. Let's see what you got." Marcus didn't have a rifle with him. He'd only come to the range with a pistol. But Derek wasn't going to let that stop the show. He was putting on. Derek held out his rifle toward Marcus with a challenging grin. "Here, use mine. Show us what SEAL training looks like." His friends snickered, clearly expecting Marcus to either decline or fail to match Derek's performance. Marcus looked at the rifle, then at Derek, then at the smug faces of Jake and his friends. Sarah held her breath, wondering what would happen next. But Marcus didn't reach for the rifle. Instead, he did something that nobody expected. He turned to Sarah. "Actually, if we're doing demonstrations, I think Sarah should take the shot." The entire group went silent. Derek's mouth fell open. Jake let out an incredulous laugh. "Dude, are you serious? She can barely hit a target at 25 feet with a pistol. You want her to shoot at 100 yards with a rifle?" Marcus kept his eyes on Sarah. She felt her heart hammering in her chest. There was no mockery in his gaze, no setup for a joke. He was completely serious. "Sarah, have you ever fired a rifle before?" She shook her head. "Never." Marcus nodded. "Would you like to try?" The question hung in the air. Sarah looked at Jake, whose face was a mixture of amusement and disbelief. She looked at Derek, who was clearly thinking this was going to be entertaining. Then she looked back at Marcus, at those calm, steady eyes that had helped her find her confidence just minutes ago. Something clicked inside Sarah. She was tired of being the punchline. Tired of being dismissed and laughed at. Tired of feeling like she didn't belong. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I want to try." Marcus gave her a slight smile. "Good." He turned to Derek. "Mind if she uses your rifle?" Derek shrugged, still grinning. "Sure, why not? This ought to be good." He handed the rifle to Marcus, who took it and immediately began checking it over with practiced efficiency. Marcus gestured for Sarah to sit at the shooting bench. She did, her hands trembling again, but this time with nervous energy rather than fear. Marcus set the rifle down carefully and began explaining. "A rifle is different from a pistol. You've got more points of contact with the weapon, which means more stability. You've got the stock against your shoulder, your cheek against the rest, and both hands on the gun. This is actually going to be easier for you than the pistol in some ways." He showed her how to shoulder the weapon properly, how to get a good cheek weld, how to look through the scope. Sarah followed his instructions, trying to absorb everything. The rifle felt heavy but solid. Marcus adjusted her position slightly, moving her elbow, correcting her posture. He spoke in that same, calm, patient voice. "Breathing is crucial with rifles. You want to take your shot during the natural pause between breaths. Don't hold your breath. Just shoot during that moment of stillness." Sarah looked through the scope at the target 100 yards away. It looked impossibly far. The crosshairs wobbled as she tried to hold them steady. Marcus knelt beside her. "You're doing great. Remember, the gun wants to hit the target. You just have to let it. Don't force anything. Smooth trigger pull, just like with the pistol." Behind them, Jake and his friends waited, expecting failure. Sarah took a breath and let it out slowly. The world seemed to narrow down to just Sarah, the rifle, and that distant target. She found the natural pause in her breathing that Marcus had described. The crosshairs settled on the center of the bullseye. Her finger rested on the trigger, and she began to apply pressure slowly, steadily, just like Marcus had taught her. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the range through the scope. Sarah saw a small hole appear in the paper target, right in the 9 ring, just an inch from the center. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, I hit it." Marcus smiled. "You sure did. Nice shot. But we're not done. I want you to do that 4 more times." Sarah's hands were shaking with adrenaline now, but it was a good feeling. She cycled the bolt, chambering another round, and settled back into position. The second shot hit even closer to center. The third shot punched through the 10 ring. By the 4th shot, Sarah had found a rhythm, and the bullet struck within an inch of her 3rd shot. Her 5th and final shot completed a group that would have made any experienced shooter proud. 5 shots clustered within a 3-inch circle, with most of them in or near the bullseye. Sarah set the rifle down and turned to look at Marcus. With disbelief written all across her face, Marcus nodded with genuine approval. "Outstanding shooting, Sarah. First time with a rifle, and you just outshot most people who've been doing this for years." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy and pride. She had done it. She had actually done it. Behind them, Jake and his friends stood in stunned silence. Derek's cocky grin had completely vanished. He walked forward to look through the spotting scope at Sarah's target, then straightened up, looking pale. Jake cleared his throat awkwardly. That was actually pretty good, babe." Sarah turned to face him, and for the first time that day, she felt powerful. "It wasn't just pretty good, Jake. It was great." Marcus stepped forward and retrieved his rifle from the bench. He looked at Derek. "You're right, you know. You are a good shot. That group you shot earlier was solid. But shooting isn't just about skill. It's about teaching, patience, and lifting others up. The best shooter on a team isn't the one with the tightest group. It's the one who can make everyone else better." Derek looked down at his feet, properly chastised. Jake seemed uncomfortable, finally realizing how he'd been treating Sarah all day. But Marcus wasn't done. He turned to address all of them. I've been in situations where my life depended on the person next to me, regardless of whether they were the best shot or not. What mattered was that we trained together, supported each other, and never left anyone behind. That's what makes a good team. Mocking someone who's trying to learn doesn't make you better. It just makes you a poor teammate. The words hit home. Even Jake's friends looked ashamed. Sarah stood there, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Marcus had not only taught her how to shoot, he'd also stood up for her in a way that Jake never had. She walked over to Marcus and extended her hand. Thank you. For everything. Marcus shook her hand firmly. You did all the hard work, Sarah. I just pointed you in the right direction. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. You've got what it takes. As the group began packing up their equipment, the atmosphere had completely shifted. Derek approached Sarah quietly and offered a genuine apology for his earlier behavior. Sarah accepted it with grace, though she knew she wouldn't forget how he'd treated her. Jake helped her pack up the rental pistol, but there was an awkwardness between them that hadn't been there before. Sarah realized that today had shown her something important about her. Relationship that she'd been ignoring. Marcus was preparing to leave when Sarah caught up with him one more time. She had to know something. Marcus, why did you help me? You didn't know me? You could have just walked past. Marcus paused and considered the question carefully. When I was going through SEAL training, there was a moment when I almost quit. It was during Hell Week, and I was at my absolute limit. I was the slowest guy in my boat crew. I felt like I was letting everyone down, he continued, his voice carrying the weight of memory. An instructor pulled me aside. He didn't yell at me or tell me to try harder. He just taught me a better technique for carrying the boat. That one small adjustment made all the difference. I learned something that day that stayed with me through my entire career. The strongest person isn't the one who can do everything alone. It's the one who helps others become stronger. Sarah felt goosebumps on her arms. So you saw me struggling and remembered that moment? Marcus nodded. I saw someone who wanted to learn but wasn't getting the support they needed. I saw someone being made to feel small when they deserved to feel capable. Nobody should feel that way, especially not when they're trying something new. That takes courage, Sarah. More courage than hitting a bullseye. They walked toward the parking lot together. Marcus stopped by a dusty pickup truck and pulled out a business card from his wallet. He handed it to Sarah. This is the shooting school where I teach sometimes. If you ever want to learn more, we'd be happy to have you. We focus on building people up, not tearing them down. Sarah took the card, knowing she would definitely be calling that number as Marcus drove away. Sarah stood in the parking lot holding that card and feeling like a different person than the one who'd arrived that morning. Jake walked up behind her. You ready to go? Sarah turned to face him. Actually, I think I'm going to drive myself home. I need some time to think. Jake looked confused and a bit hurt, but he nodded. Okay, I'll call you later. Sarah didn't answer right away. She looked down at the business card in her hand, then back at Jake. Maybe. She walked to her car and sat in the driver's seat for a moment. Processing everything that had happened, in the span of a few hours, she'd gone from feeling humiliated and inadequate to feeling powerful and capable. But more than that, she'd learned what real support and encouragement looked like. She'd learned that the people worth keeping in your life are the ones who build you up, not the ones who laugh while you struggle. 3 months later, Sarah would return to that shooting range, but this time as a student at Marcus's training school. 6 months after that, she would earn her instructor certification. A year later, she would end her relationship with Jake and start teaching other beginners, especially women who felt intimidated or out of place. She would never forget the day a Navy SEAL handed her a rifle and changed not just her shooting skills, but her entire outlook on what she was capable of achieving. And every time she taught a struggling student, she would remember Marcus's words. The strongest person isn't the one who can do everything alone, but the one who helps others become stronger.